So welcome everybody to the podcast. So our today's guest is Arushi. She is an avionics engineer, and today we are going to talk general about space research. So first of all, thank you Arushi for joining. And
Thank you for inviting me.
before we start, just give us a little bit about yourself. What is your background? What have you studied and what you do right now? And then we'll go towards our actual subject.
I am an electronics engineer. I did my BTech from almost a non-existing college, but my college was BML Munjal University. And then I got into Agnikul. So I'll just tell a few things about Agnikul. Agnikul is a private company who's trying to make launch vehicles for micro and nano satellites. So micro and nano satellites fall under the weight of around 5 to 10 kgs satellites. So we are targeting that this level of satellites, and we are sending these satellites to lower Earth orbit, that is around 700 kilometers. So that is our goal. And why we are doing this, why is Agnikul getting into this field, is because these micro and nano satellites have to wait a long time to get themselves launched. That is because let's consider ISRO's launch vehicle. So ISRO's launch vehicle are very huge. They have a payload capacity of around 1000 kgs or even more than that. So if you consider a 5 kg satellite and a 1000 kg payload, so ISRO has to fill that 1000 kg payload and then only launch. So these small satellites have to wait a long time to get their final launch. So what we are doing is we are making a very small vehicle that has a payload capacity of 100 kgs. So even these 5 kg, 10 kg satellites can get their launch as soon as they want. Also, what we are trying to do is we are trying to have a configurable vehicle. So that means we can launch with 30 kg payload as well as with 100 kg payload. With 30 kg payload, we can remove some of our engines and launch. So that would mean that the launch itself is not very expensive. Payload capacity is reduced, so time is reduced because we are making we have reduced our engines, so the development time decreased. Plus, the payload capacity is only 30 kgs, so we have to fill up only 30 kgs, and we can launch as soon as that gets filled up. So that is how we are helping this micro and nano satellites. We are basically making a Uber for them. So instead of having a bus, we are making a Uber for them.
So thank you for the introduction. So there are so many technical terms that came. So we'll come to them one by one. So first, let's start with your job itself. So for many people, even for me, I'm not aware of what does an avionics engineer do. Okay. So for the people who are interested in general space technology or that area, so first of all, what is avionics of any rocket, and what does an avionics engineer do?
Sure. So I'll start with a dramatic sentence. So avionics is basically the brain of the vehicle. So avionics includes all the electronics component that goes into controlling the vehicle in itself. So let's say you have your engines, right? So you have to control the engines through some electronic components. So that control module itself falls under avionics category. Then your vehicle talks to your ground station. So all of those electronic components that goes into talking to the ground station comes under avionics systems. Then your vehicle itself requires an autopilot loop guidance. It requires a system that can tell what the vehicle trajectory is. So that system called the guidance, navigation, and control system lies under avionics systems. So the entire control of the vehicle is done by avionics systems. So in simple terms, it's basically the entire electronics in the vehicle that falls under the avionics systems. So that is the intro to avionics in itself.
So basically those electronic components, right? So
Yes.
what is your part? Like, since that's the electronics and it controls the rocket, so basically it must have software in it, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
what is your part? Designing the electronic components or designing the software programs, those which interact with those components?
So okay. So my part, I started with a person who got involved in the hardware as well as software design. Then slowly I progressed into getting the entire system architecture ready for the vehicle. So I was responsible for making the entire avionics architecture. So when you have a vehicle, so there are so many systems in that vehicle. It's not just one electronic system controlling the entire vehicle. There are uh, 50 different systems that are working together to make one launch vehicle work. So those 50 systems have to come together in an architecture that can make all of the things work, right? So there should be a system architecture for those. So I was and I am right now responsible for designing that architecture, system level architecture, and then I would be involved in designing of each and every avionics module. So I'll be responsible for hardware design as well as software design. So we have a team of people working with us who are mainly working in the software design part, or some people who are mainly working in the hardware design part. So I joined mostly as a system design person. I got involved in system design, and then I'll be involved in both the aspects, like software plus hardware. So I won't be focused on one particular field, because I will be responsible for a particular product, and that product will have software as well as hardware. So I'll be in charge of developing that entire product. So that would require both the fields working together. Uh, yeah. So, but right now I'm mostly involved in the system design part. So, like I said, the architecture design part in itself. So, architecture design part mostly involves deciding the functionality of modules, the electronic modules, then deciding how they are talking to each other. So there are 50 systems, how they talk to each other, how each and every instruction is executed uh, with those 50 modules. So deciding all of that takes a lot of time, because we have to do a lot of trade-offs, we have to do a lot of research as to how all of this can be designed. So a lot of time goes into trade-offs and literature service. So right now I'm mostly involved in that part.
So basically, you're a product manager in terms of IT, IT
In
company.
terms of IT, yeah, I think so, yes. But yeah.
Like, do you get your hands dirty? I mean, like, you actually do some coding or some other thing, or you just design and do it to coders who implement this?
No, as I said, the starting project that I was given was actually a data acquisition system. So the hardware plus the software of that data acquisition system I was working on. But as I approached, like I think 6 months or almost 6 to 8 months in the company, I got involved in the system design part, because we were in a starting phase at that point. So when I was an intern, I was working on a single project that was data acquisition system. So that project in itself required hardware, because you have to develop a PCB for that, and then you have to write down the software for data acquisition in itself. So that involved me working on that system. So once my internship was over, I got involved in a lot of system design part. And after that, I've been going back and forth to software and hardware design as well. But mostly, I'm working in the system design part.
So like nowadays, most of the things are controlled by software, right? So how many of your, for example, I think it's called rocket booster, right? Your main. Okay, first just tell me what are the components of actual. First of all, what is a launch vehicle? Because you use the
Okay.
term 3 4 times. We'll go from top to bottom. First of all, what is a launch vehicle?
So launch vehicle is basically rocket that we say. Okay, so launch vehicle is the vehicle that is having a payload on top and engines at the bottom. So payload is basically anything. Payload can be anything. payload is your satellite, or payload is a human spacecraft also. So anything it can go into payload, but the entire vehicle that takes that payload into space is called launch vehicle or rocket. So our launch vehicle, that is Agniban. Agniban is the name of our launch vehicle. It has 7 engines in its first stage, and then it has a second stage as well. So our first stage gets separated at some point in the trajectory, and then we have a second stage for our vehicle. That second stage is having 1 engine. So that second stage is the one that takes the payload to the required orbit. So that is a launch vehicle. Did that answer your question?
Okay, so basically it's one vehicle that takes your payload to the designated orbit, right? So basically whatever the images that I have seen and most of the people seen, so basically there is a center rocket, right? The payload is on top of it. There are 4 rockets around it, right? So I think those called
Those are boosters.
right?
Sorry?
So those are booster, right? The word for it.
Yes. Yeah.
What is the use of those booster rockets?
So boosters basically help your vehicle go into space. So I said, right, ours is a stage 1 and stage 2, 2 stages rocket. So what our stage 1 does is, stage 1 helps our vehicle to cover the distance, the atmospheric, the distance that we travel through the atmosphere, and then it separates, and then a stage 2 takes the payload. So basically, the stage 1 that we have is doing the work of the boosters here. So boosters will help you travel the initial distance, and then they'll fall out. And then your vehicle will itself take the payload to the space, to the orbit. So that is the work of boosters. It basically helps you cover the initial distance. So when the vehicle takes off, the initial distance is covered by the help of those boosters. And those boosters then fall out at some point, and then your vehicle goes forward in space.
Basically what I understand. Continue.
So basically, the most rigorous time of for a launch vehicle is the time when it has to travel through atmosphere. So it has to overcome the atmospheric pressure, the resistance, the air resistance. So it has to overcome that and go to orbit. Once it reaches orbit, it's a little easier to travel because of no air resistance, so no drag. So to cover the initial distance is the difficult part, because it has to overcome the drag and the resistance part, and that is where these boosters help. And that is where.
So basically what I learned from a blog, that basically in the blog itself, it was written that the name itself said it's a booster rocket. So basically what they said, that your initial vehicle, it doesn't have enough fuel to exit the Earth's gravity. So you need some kind of boost to it. So you add extra rockets to it, and once their job is done, they are removed. That's what the actual job of booster rocket.
So that is exactly what it is.
So that I learned from that. So one another thing is, you might have heard about like SpaceX, right? SpaceX, the most famous company in space. So the most like unique selling point of SpaceX was they had a usable rocket, right? So their booster rocket can launch the vehicle, and once the vehicle is launched, it's come back to the Earth safely, right? Before that, what used to happen was those rockets used to fall in the sea, right? And they were not useful. So once SpaceX built those rockets, those can safely land on Earth, everybody was shocked, right? Like, how can they do that? Because nobody was able to do that rocket like that. So my question to is, why it is so difficult to build a reusable rocket? That rocket that can go into the atmosphere and then come back and land on Earth. Why it is so difficult?
So it has 2 to 3 levels of difficulty. One thing is so it is definitely not possible for a small vehicle. Why? Because you have to carry extra fuel. For a reusable rocket to come back again, it needs extra fuel to travel back, right? So with a small vehicle, it exceeds your mass limits. It exceeds the mass that we can carry into space. So since SpaceX vehicles were big enough to actually handle that. They carry extra fuel for that. The second level of difficulty is to have a trajectory back to the launch pad again. So your vehicle has a defined trajectory that allows it to go from launch pad to the orbit, to your required orbit, and it is a very defined trajectory. Okay, so if it deviates from that, it has to just we'll have to destruct that vehicle because it can't deviate from that required trajectory.
Right.
Sorry.
So you just have to plummet that vehicle into the sea, right?
That, or you can destruct it. You can just blow up the vehicle. So every vehicle has a flight termination system.
Okay.
I'll come to that. We can discuss about that also. So every vehicle has a flight termination system that that actually blows it up if the vehicle is going out of trajectory, out of its defined trajectory. So moving on from that, so basically we have a very defined trajectory to go into orbit. So apart from that, along with that, they also have a very defined trajectory to come back to the launch pad itself. So it requires a very accurate algorithm to actually define a trajectory and actually maintain the vehicle in that trajectory and just land it on a very small area. So that launch pad you have seen, right? The launch pad name is PSI Love You. That launch pad is a very small area compared to, you see that vehicle has to land within that area, and that too completely erect, because if it falls, it goes, it blows up. If it lands somewhere else, like let's say just 50 meters away from the defined position, it is again lost, because that launch pad is very small in size. So it has to land exactly on that small area, and that too completely erect. So defining the algorithm to follow that trajectory in itself was a challenge. And that is why when they did it, it became a huge sensation at that point. So yeah, two problems basically: carrying extra fuel,
Okay.
and defining the algorithm to actually land it back.
So it was a software problem. I mean, like people were not able to figure out the software for the second part.
Yes. Software again was a problem. Then because hardware is same. Hardware is same because you have to the hardware that allows you to launch the vehicle into the space, and the one that allows you to land is mostly the same. Hardware is not hardware is not unknown challenge. It is known. It is still difficult, but it is known. Software was a unknown challenge at that point, so they made that algorithm to actually land it on the launch pad. So that was an unknown challenge.
With respect to the fuel, so when your rocket is let's say its use is over, okay, now you have to take that rocket back to the earth. So you said about the fuel, right? So why do we need a fuel while taking the rocket back? So I think rocket will be in free fall, right? If you don't have a fuel.
Yes. If we don't have fuel, it would be free fall. So you've seen SpaceX booster stage coming back to PSI level, the launch pad, right? You've seen that. So how it does is it follows the engine is on. So the engine is ignited, and it is coming back like this. So it has a trajectory and it comes back like this. So fuel is needed to ignite that engine. So to keep that engine working, the fuel is needed. Okay. If there is no fuel, the engine is not ignited, it would just fall. Okay. You can't have the vehicle just fall, because the vehicle is not just above the launch pad, right? It is somewhere very far away from the launch pad itself. Right. So it has to come back within that trajectory, and to maintain that trajectory, it has to work its engine. So the engine has to work, and for engine to work, it has to carry fuel. And if we were not reusing that stage, the stage would have just had a free fall, and it would have fallen into ocean. So at that point, we don't require that fuel. But since we are landing that vehicle on that launch pad, that is why we require fuel, because the engine had to work, and by controlling the engine movements, we control the trajectory, and that is how it lands.
Basically, in
So
order
that
to
is why we require fuel.
control the aircraft in, sorry, in the rocket in free fall, you need engine power, right?
Correct.
So actually, I saw in that video also first when the rocket got away from the actual main vehicle, it reignited, and then it came back.
Correct.
Right?
Yes, yes. So the engine is shut down once it separates, and then it is again reignited. So for that reignition itself, we require fuel.
You actually at that time you could see the tension on Elon Musk's face that it's not reigniting. What's happened? So that's video on National Geographic. That's what I said. So since you talked about the vehicles, right? So how much of a bigger impact this discovery has on general space research that you now you can reuse the booster rockets?
So it is actually a very big step, because if you consider bigger missions like Mars missions and Moon missions, so then you will be launching, and you consider people living there. So I'm going into very future terms here. Like let's say 10 to 20 years after from now,
Elon Musk is
people have,
already there.
huh?
Elon Musk is mentally already on Mars.
Mentally on exactly, yeah, he's on Mars right now. So let's say 10 to 20 years from now, we have established a Mars base, okay, and we have also established a moon base. So we'll be frequently launching people, supplies, and things into space to Mars. So if we don't have a reusable vehicle, we'll have to again and again make vehicles, and again uh, launch them. And so two things: development time goes into making every launch vehicle from the scratch again, plus money goes into that. So if you just launch a vehicle and just let it fall into the ocean, so there that and you make the vehicle again from the scratch, that means money again goes into making that vehicle. So to have frequent launches within the budget, and having within the time constraint also. So you'll have time constraint because there are people depending on us on Mars space. Those people depend on us for supplies. They depend on us for the resources that we can supply to them. So you don't have time there also. You have a very strict time constraint. So at that point, if you can reuse your vehicle, you can launch very frequently. So that is why it is very, very important to have a reusable vehicle. Right now also, they're actually having very frequent launches, and they're able to use that booster stage without any problem. So they are able to correct for the damages that happen, and they're able to reuse that stage. So that means it saves them the money that will go into making an entire booster stage again. So there is their money saved plus time saved. So I see two importance: money and time saved. That would be the major parameters that we'll have to work on when we are considering Mars missions or Moon missions, anything.
So basically, because of that, there is just the influx of satellites going into the Earth because now that has become economically viable.
Yes,
Right?
correct.
So
That is true.
my next question is related to the satellites only. So basically, whenever we say that Israel launched some satellites, or private companies like yours or SpaceX launched so many satellites, what is the actual use of satellites in terms of our daily life? Because people usually don't know what a satellite in Earth's orbit play a very important role in their daily life. Right. So can
Correct,
you give
correct.
some examples like why we should need to spend more money in launching satellites?
Okay. So you daily use your Google Maps, right? So mapping your entire, basically they've mapped entire Earth on that. You have entire all the countries, everything is mapped properly into those Google Maps that they've done. So they use satellites for that. So they have satellites for they have satellites to do the entire imaging of the Earth, entire mapping of the Earth. That is one use. Then you are using communication. So we have communication satellites. So you watch TV, right? So TV again, how do you get the reception for that? So that is again with the help of a communication satellite. Then there are other uses, like those are not, you might not be able to relate to them, but uses like disaster management support. Disaster management support, or agriculture, or forestry department, all of these departments use satellites for the help of imaging, for the help of soil mapping. So all these things require a use of your satellites itself. So coming back to the communication part, you can now actually there is a shift now from RF transmission. So satellites use RF transmission, radio frequency transmissions. So those RF transmissions, with the help of those transmissions, we are able to communicate with each other, or we are able to get the reception for the TV. But now we are shifting towards optical transmissions, fiber optics. So yeah, there is a shift there, definitely, and that is why we are actually going RF mute. There's a term called RF, like we are going RF mute. That is, we are not emitting so much of RF frequency into the space as we were in the last 50 years. We were emitting so much radio frequency waves, but now we have reduced that, because we are mostly doing our communication through fiber optics now. So there is a shift there, but still, so these are the uses of satellites according to me: communication, and then road mapping, everything, maps, for maps. So for all of these things, we require satellites.
So basically, you said we used to emit a lot of radio frequency waves before, right? Now we don't. So like, is it bad?
We do. No, we do use still, and it's definitely not a bad thing. It's because your fiber optics are faster. Your fiber optics, it uses light waves, right? So it's definitely faster in communication, and it's error free. So you have a lot of error in RF transmission that we'll have to correct for. So the error reduces in communication, and it is definitely a faster communication. It is not a bad thing at all. It is just a phase change. So earlier we were focused on RF waves, RF for communication. Now we are shifting towards optical fiber communication. So this is just a phase change. It is definitely not a bad thing. Why I was saying RF mute was we always wonder that we are releasing radio frequency waves into the space, and if there is anyone in if there is some other species in space, they would be able to hear us through those RF waves that we release, RF frequency waves that we release into the space. So we are actually reducing that now. So there is less chances of someone discovering us. So that was the only reason I mentioned the RF mute phase. But yeah, it's definitely just a phase change. Nothing bad in moving to fiber optics.
Existence of aliens. Existence of aliens is some another debate. So the reason I asked about whether it's good or bad, because the last guest was my friend who is an environment specialist, right? So she has a specialty in climate change. So she gave so many examples of human behavior that is causing climate change. Like almost everything we do every day has contributed somewhere to the climate change. So I thought maybe this is also something that is causing climate change, and people are like, thank God we are not radio right now.
I am not sure. I can't comment on that part. But definitely, I think there would be some advantages for that. I'm not sure. I really can't comment on that part.
So since we are talking about the satellites, so you may have heard about the Starlink project, right?
Yes.
Basic Starlink project. So they are sending so many satellites in the sky, like thousands, in order to do satellite internet to the entire world, right? So
Correct.
like with every technology, people started criticizing it. The reason they said is that there are already so many satellites in the Earth's orbit that if you take Earth's picture from like outside the atmosphere into space, we cannot see the Earth. It's just so many satellites there. So like, is it even viable for now to even launch those? Is there space in space to launch satellites now?
It is definitely viable, but yeah, it is definitely affecting a lot of people. So Starlink was launched with an objective to provide internet for all, right? So internet at lower prices for everyone, and with maximum coverage, with maximum people being able to access internet. But there is a problem associated with that as well. So you see, people are there are astronauts, sorry, there are astronomers who are actually trying to do discoveries by watching night sky every day, but it is becoming difficult for them to actually get a proper view of night sky, because like you said, there are so many satellites in the orbit right now that it is blocking their view. So that is why I think Starlink project was criticized in the first place, because people are already worried that the places where they were able to see these celestial objects, they were able to see the stars. They're not able to see that anymore because of the satellites blocking their path. Okay, so that is one reason the Starlink project itself is criticized. One solution to that I could think of is, there are people working on this right now. So there are people who are working, who are trying to get the debris, the satellites that have stopped working. So you see, satellites have become so easy that every university has some satellite program. They're trying to launch their own mini micro satellites into space. So that is why I think, again, it is making, again, the satellites in orbit are increasing, because it has become so easy and economical that any university student itself can do that. So, but the satellites don't work for a longer time. They work for 1-2 years or maybe 5 years. So after that, they stop working. So if we can make a project that, if we can make a vehicle that can actually help us remove those things from the orbit and take it back to Earth or maybe somewhere else, we could actually remove this debris around, debris that is flowing around the orbit, because the debris doesn't go anywhere, right? It always stays there. So if we can remove those non-working satellites, or the debris that is there, this debris is basically the parts of spacecraft, the launch vehicle that actually was left in space. Anything that is there flowing just and that is not being used or that is not working, if we can remove that, we can definitely make space for new satellites, right? So that is one solution I think we can actually work on, having a vehicle that can remove the debris from space.
So
So
I was reading another blog one day, and according to estimates, like 60% of satellites are not in current use. They are just launched, and
yeah,
people forget about it. It's just revolving around the Earth for no reason.
yes, exactly,
So
exactly,
you might have know Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? He is the
yes,
one of
yes,
the famous astrophysicists. So I was
that's
listening to one of his podcasts, and United States just a couple of years back launched a new military branch called Space Force. So somebody asked,
yes, yes,
so the main aim of Space Force is to save United States from attack from space. So it's quite
yeah.
funny. So he was explaining, he's like, we already have an air force for that. Okay. So he said that somebody asked him, what is your comment on Space Force since he's an astrophysicist? So he said, if you want to really use Space Force for something, use it to remove the debris from space. That would be really helpful for us, right?
Yes, yes, definitely.
So there are two, three things about the termination of the flight termination system that you talked about, right? About every satellite. So just to give a little bit of background, so couple of, I think you also know about that. ISRO launched a satellite, something missile, something like that, which can destroy the satellite in the space.
Yeah.
So
It created a huge commotion. Yeah, it was a huge
ISRO destroyed
thing in
our
news.
own satellite, which was not even used.
Mhm.
So, but it was very criticized by rest of the space agencies like NASA and European agencies because it created so much debris in the space, right?
Yeah. The reason behind criticizing that part was, the intention was good, because we wanted to destroy the satellites that are not being used and remove them from space. But the problem with that was they did not remove the debris. So The main problem is the debris that is flowing in, that is orbiting around Earth. But even if they destroyed the satellite, they did not remove the debris. And the other problem was they did not know where the debris would go. Okay, so there is one thing, that debris is orbiting around Earth, but they did not know when they destroyed the satellite where would it go. It could have hit some other satellites. It could have also hit some other working satellite, and
Actually,
that satellite
people
itself could have gone.
people are most worried about the International Space Station. They thought
Yes, ISS itself. Yes, yeah, it could have hit space station itself. So exactly why they were worried about it, because it's orbiting, continuously orbiting, and that debris itself could be. So the problem was they did not analyze where the debris would go, and they did not work on removing the debris also. So that is why it was criticized. But the intention behind it was to actually remove the non-working satellites, and to be able to remove them from orbit itself. But yeah, so that is why it was criticized.
So for the people who don't know why it's so important, so people who criticize ISRO's mission was that because just couple of years back, a tiny part of some satellite, like this big, it was the size of a small bolt. It went through International Space Station, and what happened was it created a small big hole of this size.
Yeah.
But the actual size of the bolt of only this. The reason is that in space there is no gravity, so there is no resistance. So things in space are moving in like 1,000,000 miles per hour. So something is moving at that speed. Its momentum is so big that its size doesn't
Momentum,
matter.
it's a huge momentum. Yes.
Right.
Okay.
So my next question is, what is the safe way to remove that debris? Because I don't think you can pull it down to the earth, right?
Yeah, I would not be able to comment on that. I've not basically looked into those technologies. But maybe you can collect those debris. So maybe it is definitely possible to take it back. But it's not useful to take it back on Earth. Like, we already have so much waste on Earth that taking the space waste also on Earth is actually creating huge. That would create a huge problem. So um, definitely, I don't know what is the technology being used right now. I can't comment on that, but I don't think so. Taking it back on Earth is a very good solution, because we are not able to handle the everyday waste that we are creating. Like, taking all the space waste again on Earth is going to create a huge heap of space waste on Earth, which we can't which we will not be able to do anything with. So definitely not a good option to take it back on Earth. But I really don't have any idea about how it is being done right now. Or maybe we can so again, there are so many things. Maybe we can launch it to, or maybe we can collect that debris and launch it somewhere else. So launch it maybe we can dump it somewhere else, but I'm not sure.
So basically, astronauts, space scientists were,
Dump it on the astronaut.
yeah. So astronauts and space scientists were worried about that. Don't make it like a plastic problem. So what happens with
Exactly.
plastic problem is going to happen with that. People kept on using it, and the level will dump somewhere and we'll figure out a way. Now we have reached a level where we don't have a way to how to get rid of that plastic.
Exactly.
Scientists are saying, don't make it a plastic problem. Figure out what we are going to do with debris before launching your new satellites.
Yes. Yes.
That's the
Yeah,
biggest.
definitely. Electronics is again going to be a huge problem, since, like, electronics again, like dumping or handling that electronic waste is going to be a huge problem in the coming years, because we are trying to overcome global warming problem by shifting everything to electric, right? Electric vehicles, electric scooters, everything is shifting to electric. We are also considering electric propulsion. So maybe the vehicle itself can have the electric propulsion part, no fuel required. So everything is shifting towards electric. So electronics is going to be a new plastic problem, as you said, if you're not going to figure out a way how to dump that electronics properly. So definitely electronics can become the new plastic problem if you don't handle that properly. we definitely need a way to handle it correctly.
So you just said about the electronic propulsion for rockets. Right? Is it even like possible with current technology? Because of in aviation, everything is about
Uh,
right?
not from Earth, not launching from Earth, but electric propulsion is used in orbit. So since there is not much drag to overcome there, not much resistance to overcome there. So electronic propulsion is used there. We have different companies who are working for satellites. So satellites are using the electric propulsion part because they mostly orbit in space and they don't require that much force to overcome. So yes, it can be used in orbit, but not on Earth right now. Not We won't be able to use it from Earth.
So I just want to talk about a little bit about a company now. So do you know any other companies? Like what is the current situation of space technology in India? Like do we have other
Okay.
companies on the same technology like you?
Correct. So we have another company called Skyroot. They're definitely working on. They're again working to launch satellites into space, but their payload capacity is a little different than us. They have a higher payload capacity. So mostly in this area, that in this payload capacity that we are working right now, we are the only ones who's working in this capacity payload capacity, and most of the micro and nano satellites are in this range only. So that is why I think in this like in this range, we are the only ones working right now. Agnicol is the only one that is working right now. But we definitely have some sort of friendly competition with Skyroot because they're again one of the other private company that is working along with us. So there is definitely that who will launch first kind of thing. But yeah, we have our own different vehicles. So there and our vehicle have different capacity itself. So you can say that we will be competing in different, like we will be in different ranges of vehicle altogether. There will be theirs will be a larger vehicle, ours would be a smaller vehicle. So we will target the payload capacity of around let's say 30 to maximum 250 kgs. We'll be targeting that, and theirs would be above 250 kg. So that is the yeah, that is the difference that is there between us. But yeah, basically there is another company called Bellatrix that is also working with us. So I think there are these three companies that are working for launch vehicles only. And then there are spacecraft companies in India. They are emerging. They're emerging at a high rate right now because of the in-space agreement you've seen from ISRO side. So in-space basically allows private companies to take help and to use facilities from ISRO. So ISRO would be guiding us. ISRO would be allowing us to use their facilities, and ISRO would also provide the options and to use the launch pad in Sriharikota. So all of those things would help the private companies right now to emerge. So we'll definitely see rise of new companies in the next 5 to 10 years because of this agreement being signed right now. So we actually came at a very good time. Agnicol came at a very good time because we were struggling. We are actually we were involved in that development phase for 3 years, and then suddenly we started getting some help from ISRO, and then this in-space agreement came in. So this allowed us to use a lot of help and resources from ISRO's side. So we are definitely getting so much help from ISRO. So that actually helped, and it would encourage other private companies to come forward and take this responsibilities, take charge in this part.
So I was about to ask you about that. Like is this your competitor or it helps you? So you just give the answer already.
Yeah, they definitely help us. So they would definitely want these private companies to take this part of this part of commercial launches, the smaller satellites, because then they can focus on bigger missions like Mangalyaan, Chandrayaan. Uh, so definitely we can help them in handling some part of the commercial spacecraft, commercial space launches. because then they can focus on the bigger missions.
And,
So ISRO is definitely not a competitor.
and companies like you can help ISRO in outsourcing some stuff, right? Because
Mhm.
right now they build everything in-house. ISRO.
ISRO? Yes, yes. Yeah, mostly all of their systems are built in-house. Even their processors, even like every small, from small things to big things, they're majorly making everything in-house. Only few components are outsourced. So yeah, we can. I don't know how much they will help us on the components part itself, but the vendors that they have, they can definitely help us with those vendor contacts.
In terms of outsourcing, the way I was saying that if ISRO has enough smaller startups like you, which are quite established and have a good quality, they don't have to build everything on their own. They can just outsource some stuff and
Correct,
focus on
correct.
the
That is also true.
right. So
Yes, yes.
companies like
Yeah,
you
we have not looked at,
ISRO.
we have not looked into that part yet, but yeah, that is definitely an option. Correct.
So ISRO is going to conduct a manned moon mission, right? I think in 2022. What is your take on
Yeah,
that?
they were saying. It is definitely a good thing actually. So ISRO has always been that stable, reliable space organization that has always launched spacecraft with utmost care. So their the focus that they have on safety and safe missions is very huge. So they were not like, let's say when the space race was going on, we did not start our space organization just to take part in that space race, just to just for the sake of taking participation in that space race that was going on between US and Russia. So it was not that. Huh?
It was just who goes first. That was
Yeah, that space race was focused on who goes first into space. But ISRO started with a different vision. ISRO started because at that point we were just a budding country. Like we just got our independence. We were working towards making things work in India and developing India. So basically, the space organization started with the objective to provide independent, to make India independent by providing these technologies to India. So if India had its own space organization, it could launch its own satellite. It could launch its own. It could help them in their military technologies. So these kind of things was needed for India as because India was developing. So it was launched with this objective to help India become independent in space technologies as well. Now, right now, that space race has gone to human missions. Like it has gone to mankind being in space. Now that would become, now satellites has become the new normal for us. Satellites are very normal for us. Everyone is launching satellites. Let's say in 10 years, maybe human missions, man missions becomes the new normal, right? It it is definitely becoming, right? You see space tourism being addressed by two companies right now, Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic. They're basically working on space tourism in itself as an opportunity. So, so definitely manned missions are going to be the new normal in next 10 years. So if ISRO takes part in manned missions, so in next 10 years, they could come to a level where manned missions are normal for ISRO as well. And they would be able to launch humans in space when it is really needed, right? Because at that point there will be countries who are doing proper research on different planets. They're establishing their moon base or they're establishing the Mars base. So at that point we will need someone from India also to go and work there, or we'll need India itself to have its own base to become a part of this major event that would be there for mankind. This would be a huge event in the mankind history. We are actually establishing a base on a planet or on a object that is not Earth. We are actually establishing something on a different celestial body. So it is definitely going to be a very huge step in the mankind history. So it would be really good if ISRO and if India takes part in that, not just because of, for the sake of taking part in that. It would be really needed at that point, because if we have to develop, if we have to go forward along with these countries, we'll have to compete with them. So definitely the human mission, the man mission that ISRO is targeting is definitely needed. There could be some delay in that, but I think we should be able to do it. ISRO should be able to manage that, because till now we have overcome all the challenges with very low budget. Like we don't have huge budget like other space organizations. So we have definitely managed all the missions. Let's say Mangalyaan, all these missions with such less budget, and with just our own innovations, our own small things that we could do to cut costs. So since we've managed to do all of this, I think we can manage to do a man mission as well. Timeline can go a bit here and there, but we would be able to do that.
So in terms of budget that you're talking, right? So this is the common criticism of the space agencies, not just in India, it is all around the world, especially in development countries, that why we are spending so much money on building a rocket, even if we have so many problems here on Earth, right? So the same question was asked to Neil deGrasse Tyson. So why we are spending so much money on NASA, right? So he gave a very nice example that he said, whatever the technology that NASA does, it's not just proprietary to NASA. NASA gives to everybody else to use, right? And since space agencies work in so much difficult environments, creativity and all these kind of things prevail there, because there is nothing in abundance in space, whatever you are used to on Earth, right? So you have to use all technology. You have to go to pinnacle of engineering and science in order to do even the small thing in space. So that drives technology. So he was giving a small example that today we are using all those solar panels, right? NASA is the one who came up with solar panels because they didn't know how to power a satellite once its fuel is got over, right? So it was developed by NASA. Then another example he gave, that the power tool that we use, right, to unbolt the bolts, right? That was also developed by NASA, because when you are in gravity, you don't have that much of power because there is no gravity in space, right? So you cannot undo with your hand. So you need something to undo with it. So it was developed by NASA. So he was saying it helps when you give budget to these kind of things. So can you give us a little bit your take on that, that why we need to fund ISRO and why ISRO has played at least some role? There is a very big role, but some role in development of our country. Why we need to give a little bit more budget to ISRO?
Okay, so but first I would like to address the problem that you said. Why to spend so much on space missions when there are already so many problems on Earth? I have written an article on that also on Medium. I'm addressing this problem only there. So it's obviously a correct question to ask. Like we see so many people, they don't even have proper amenities. Basic essential needs are also not being fulfilled for those people. So why is it needed to spend so much for coming like for space missions? That is because if we try to solve all our problems that exist on Earth by staying on Earth, in the end we would be left with nothing, because we have used every possible resource on Earth to overcome our problems, and we would be left with nowhere else to go, because we did not work on space missions. We used up every resource that was there on Earth to try to come up with a solution that could help us save, which in itself led to degradation of Earth itself. And then we would not have any way to go. So that is why space missions are needed. That is why humans need to be multiplanetary, because there are so many resources available in space. You know the example of asteroid mining, right? So there are so many things materials that we on those asteroids that can be back on Earth. That we don't have to that we don't have to try to mine everything from Earth. We can have those space missions we can have those materials being mined on asteroids and taken back on Earth. And definitely we need to go multi-planetary because there is always that chance of some asteroid coming in and destroying species on Earth like it did earlier. There is no definitive way of saying that it won't happen. There is no definitive way of saying that we would be able to save us if that happens. So definitely there is that fear that that promotes humanity to go multiplanetary, because if that happens to Earth at some point in time, we would have something established on other planets, and we would be able to save humanity as a species because of that. So that again is definitely a problem. So plus, if you talk about ISRO, it has again inspired so many people to actually work in work in this field. And let's keep aside the technical part in itself. It is giving employment to so many people right now. It has been employing so many people in ISRO organization that those people won't have a job anywhere else, because if we are they're mostly core technological jobs, right? Core technical jobs are being developed by ISRO. Plus, they're helping out so many industries in itself. So ISRO is making their own launch vehicles, and they require so many things to be to be made. So they are having so many vendors for that, and those vendors are in itself getting advantage, because we are able to ISRO in itself is able to provide employment for so many other companies as well. Like they're able to generate so many necessity, like so many needs for the components that other companies are benefiting from that. So it generates a whole ecosystem around it itself. So it gives employment to people. It generates the need of the components. So and whole ecosystem is developed around it, which in itself is helping India to develop. And then there are things like satellites that is helping us to talk to anyone anywhere in this world. And so far and so forth, there are so many advantages of this in itself. One thing is it's not basically it's not something you can measure, but it inspires you, right? So all these space agencies, all of these space organizations are helping in inspiring people to work. Like they inspire so many people in daily lives that yes, we can do something that seems unattainable. So all these space programs are if you just think about them now, they all seem so unattainable, right? They all seem so out of our reach. Like landing a human on moon in itself seems so far from our reach, but these people have done that, and so they inspire humanity on a daily basis. So I think they're definitely needed, because then we won't have a dream and we won't have a goal to move forward. So I think being multiplanetary is that goal that I'm talking about, that goal that humans should work towards now. Definitely it would take time, but we should start somewhere, right? So I think that is the point we should start with. And for the problems that are there on Earth right now, let's say whether it is global warming or things like material shortage, everything can be handled if we are able to establish something on other planets. So resource shortage we can handle by asteroid mining. Global warming aspects, maybe we can shift some of our industries to different planets if we are able to build a proper proper ecosystem around that. Like we can help Mars give some components back to Earth. So some of our industries can shift there.
see some Apple factory on Mars.
Yeah.
Design in
Yeah, we can
California.
shift some agricultural aspects also there.
Design in
So
California.
yeah,
Mars.
yeah. So yeah, definitely, we would be able to save Earth in a way. We can reduce some of the factories that are suffocating Earth every day and shift them to someplace else. So we'll be dividing the load definitely. Then obviously now let's say 3D printing is getting so much. It is growing so much. Why? Because 3D printing again was is needed so much in space technologies. So let's say you're on Mars right now and you want to build something. It's very difficult to actually carry all those CNC machines, big machines to develop something on Mars. So you can carry just a 3D printer, and with the help of materials available on Mars, you can actually make concrete. You can make bricks that would be used. Some other material that would be used. So 3D printing is gaining so much movement. Like it is really popular right now. We actually in Agnicol also we have a 3D printed engine. So our engine is entirely 3D printed.
So I was about to ask you that because I just saw a documentary yesterday about 3D printing. They
Okay.
said that most of the space agencies are using 3D printing. So I was about to ask you that do you use any 3D printing materials?
Yes, our engine is 3D printed and it's a single piece engine. There are no multiple parts in our engine. It's entirely one piece and the entire thing is 3D printed.
So about the dream that you said, no? So even actually your answer exactly mirrors Neil deGrasse Tyson answer. He also said that NASA gave us a dream to think about, right? That we can land a man on the moon. So you need something to live, right? So that's the philosophical aspect of why we should land man missions. And the second was that
Okay.
moon exploration. So humans always been explorative. That is the reason
Yes.
why we came from caves to where are we right now, because of the
Exactly.
human exploration.
Exactly.
It's not something that we are doing unnaturally. It's in our
That is our nature.
right?
Yes, that is in our nature, right? Like we have always been so explorative. Like we have discovered so many lands. If we were not explorative, we did not explore by nature, we would have been locked somewhere in the cave, as you said, and we would not even have discovered so many land masses that are there on Earth. So we have been curious and explorative by nature from the starting, and that is what we are expanding right now to other celestial bodies and not just being on Earth.
We
So
almost
we are actually not doing anything new here.
yes,
It's just what is there in our nature.
it's just the next step because we
Okay.
already explored
Just the
almost
next.
everything on Earth. There is nothing to
Exactly.
explore right now.
Exactly.
So my like last question is like there are so many people who are like genuinely excited about space and astronomy and all these kind of things. So since you work in that domain, so
Hmm.
in terms of what kind of jobs are there, you can talk about jobs in your company as well. And in general, what in terms of technology, what jobs are there that people can pursue?
Ah, okay. So not just in terms of technical jobs, there are so many other jobs also. I'll come to that. But let's consider the technical part right now. So let's say in our company in itself, we have jobs for electronics people. Electronics include everything, let's say software, hardware, then firmware development. Everything comes within that. So all the things that you're looking for with the electronics field, you can have a job profile in space companies for that. Then electrical jobs. So people who are associated with the electrical field, so there are so many things that we require help on in like we require so many electrical engineers to work on the components that go into space vehicles. So definitely all the electrical engineers can come. Then all the mechanical engineers. The entire vehicle is the major part is the engine. So a mechanical person who is involved in this field can definitely come and uh, work in this area. Then a thermal engineer. So there are so many things that we have to handle on the thermal aspects. So the vehicle has to go through so lower temperatures, because once it is in orbit, it is under very low temperature. So that aspect, plus the side that is sun facing handles in orbit handles so much of heat, so that goes to high pressure, high temperature. So that is why thermal aspects for a vehicle is very, very important. So a thermal engineer can work in any space agencies. Then structural engineers. So we require use of so many new materials, and we have to build so many structures that are rigid yet low, yet they have less mass, like they don't weigh so much. So there is so much research there as well to work on. There's so many things to work on there. So a structural engineer can definitely come here. Then let's say controls engineer. So along with the electronics part, we require algorithms to provide the control for the whole vehicle. So the vehicle has to follow a particular trajectory. As I said earlier, there needs to be an autopilot. So the vehicle is completely autonomous, right? Because we can't actually control the vehicle and say, yeah, okay, turn left, turn right. It has to be completely autonomous. So there is autopilot loop running there. So that entire control has to be given and has to be developed. So a controls engineer can work in space agencies. So that is some part on the technique. Your trajectory design itself, that requires the use of software. So there we use a lot of programming languages. So an IT person can also come and work here. So in space organization, an IT person can also have a job role. He could work on Python or any language that these people are using for their mission design tools. So an IT person can definitely work. So these are on the technical aspects. Now let's say you consider apart from technical, what all jobs we will be able to generate. So there are jobs for operations. So a lot of things we have to handle. We have to talk to so many vendors. We have to talk to so many people. We have to collaborate with so many organizations. So everything requires the use of a operations person. Then when we are having the launch vehicle in itself, we have to handle so many processes that would be going on there. So an operations person would help us there. Then marketing also. So we have a vehicle. Now we need customers for that. So we would definitely require a marketing person for that. So digital marketing, normally, or the marketing field also requires people. Now it also requires accountants, because you have to manage the money again. In every organization, you need that, right? So there's job for them also. So it's basically an entire industry that requires all the fields of technical people, then all of these non-technical persons as well. So an HR person again, since it is a company in itself, it requires an HR for that also. So it gives jobs to your human resources as well. So so these are the some fields that a space organization can generate jobs in. So uh, from my like, yeah, that is I think these many jobs can be created in any space organization.
So basically, if you are interested in space, there is a job for you. Is the
Yes.
right?
Anything you're working on, we have a job for you.
Okay. My next question is: Did have your company launched any satellite yet?
No, not yet. uh, we are in still development phase. We are planning to launch by 20, maximum by, we are planning to launch by 22, maximum by 23, since there were some delays because of this pandemic. We were not able to go to office, and work was stopped. We also stopped using liquid oxygen that was going into engine test, because it was needed for pandemic time. So there we stopped doing our tests also. for some time. So there is some delay there, but we are planning to target 22 or 23 for our first launch.
The reason I asked because I just saw the launch of Perseverance aircraft, right?
Mhm.
The NASA launch on Mars.
Yes,
When
yes.
the launch was going on, and there is something called 4 minutes of terror or something like that. When you cannot communicate with the rocket, right? Because it goes
Mhm.
up inside out, something like that. So there was so much tension on their head, so much anxiety, and in a split second, when the message come that it has landed safely, the joy on their face was so much. So I was just wanted to ask you about that emotion if you have felt it. So I think we have to wait for 1 year for you to experience that. That when you launch
Experience.
a vehicle, you don't have to wait because, as you said, it's completely autonomous, right? So once it's launched, it's up to him.
It's a yeah. You can just sit there and wait and see it see it traveling through space, and you can't do anything. Yeah, or for the perseverance part, that time that you said, right? It took it 4 minutes because that is because it takes that much time for the signal to come back to Earth. So since there is that distance between Earth and Mars, the signal in itself takes, and that is only when the Earth and Mars are closest. It takes around 4 minutes to take that signal to travel back to Earth. That is why they had to wait for that 4 minutes, and then they were like, "Oh, okay, finally it has landed." So yeah, that is that wait, and definitely once you've launched, there's nothing you can do, and you have to just wait and pray for its, you know, please don't let anything get in the way. It just it goes, and if everything goes well, and there are so many things that have to go well for a successful launch, like. If let's say your vehicle took off from launchpad, after that you are worried, oh, please stage separation, let it happen properly. So stage separation is the time when the stage one separates and the stage two goes forward. Then the stage two ignition, engine has to ignite. So that ignition, please stage two, let the stage two get ignited. So then after that happens, the payload has to be ejected. Okay, so there are so many events, so many things that have to go right to have one successful launch. So basically, there are thousands of wrong ways and only one correct way, and that one correct way has to happen for a successful launch. So definitely, it's so stressful to wait, but
Because
yeah, that feeling would be some
I think it's in like completely open environment, right?
correct.
In Earth atmosphere, anything can go wrong.
Anything can go wrong. Correct. Yes.
We need to wait for 1 year for you to experience that. So once you launch your actual satellite, we'll ask you to come on our show again, just to ask you.
Definitely.
First of all, thanks for joining. Okay, so we are at the end of our podcast. So you have your own blog, right?
I published it on Medium. So I've just published that article alone. So I'll be publishing in future, but I've started now. So it's on Medium.
So for the people who are interested in space programs, job in space industry, so her LinkedIn profile will be in the job in the video description. So if anybody wants to connect with her, you can connect with her. You can her
Definitely.
blog link will be also there. So if you want to read
Yeah.
about her blog that she just mentioned, you can read about that as well.
Definitely. And it's published with Agnikul Medium blog. So if they want to read about anything else that goes into space, there are so many blogs in Agnikul account. So they can just go there and read about other blogs as well. But I promise I'll be writing some other blogs as well, just if I can find some time.
So we would like to wish you best for your launch, whatever that
Thank
time
you
will
so
be.
much.
And we hope that you will be next time you will be coming. There will be a successful launch, so you can talk about that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks
Yeah.
for joining.
Thank you for inviting. And everyone who's interested, please do take part in space field, because there is definitely so much opportunities, so much excitement to work in this field, that it would mostly be one of the best working experience that you'll have anywhere in any of these fields, because you're self motivated to work here. You're so encouraged, so motivated to work in space agencies. So definitely it would be a very good experience. So yeah, definitely do join and do contact me if anything is there. I would definitely help. Thank you.
Okay.